Daniel Carter stood at the edge of the observation deck, his silhouette swallowed by moonlight, while below, the sea kept its secrets. Samantha's laughter had once echoed through these corridors, but now her absence was louder than any scream. What began as a honeymoon had twisted into a haunting, and with every lie Daniel told, the truth clawed closer to the surface. Samantha and Daniel Carter had always dreamed of a picture-perfect wedding followed by an unforgettable honeymoon. After months of planning, they exchanged vows on a quiet Florida beach, surrounded by close friends and family. The ceremony was simple but elegant, with soft music, golden sunlight, and handwritten promises. Just hours later, they boarded the Ocean Pearl, a luxury cruise ship bound for the Caribbean. It was their first trip as husband and wife, and everything felt like a fairy tale. The cruise offered endless indulgence, gourmet meals, live shows, and island excursions. Samantha posted smiling selfies from the ship's deck, her hair tousled by the sea breeze, her eyes glowing with excitement. Daniel appeared equally thrilled, often seen holding her hand, whispering in her ear, or raising a glass to their new life together. They visited the Bahamas, snorkeled in turquoise waters, and danced under moonlight during the ship's themed parties. Other passengers described them as inseparable, the kind of couple that made love look effortless. Their cabin was on the upper deck, with a private balcony overlooking the ocean. Samantha had decorated it with rose petals and candles, turning it into a cozy retreat. She kept a travel journal, jotting down memories and sketching little hearts beside Daniel's name. Everything seemed perfect until the fourth night. That evening, the couple attended a formal dinner. Samantha wore a pale blue dress, and Daniel looked sharp in a tailored suit. They laughed, toasted champagne, and posed for photos. But sometime after dessert, Samantha left the table alone. She told the waiter she was heading to the deck for fresh air. Daniel stayed behind, chatting with other guests. Hours passed. Samantha never returned. By morning, she was officially missing, and the dream honeymoon had taken a chilling turn. Daniel Carter alerted the ship's crew just after sunrise. He claimed his wife, Samantha, had gone for a walk on the upper deck the night before and never returned. Panic spread quickly. Staff began a full sweep of the vessel, checking every hallway, lounge, and cabin. Her room was untouched, clothes neatly folded, her phone still charging, and her sandals placed beside the bed. There was no sign of a struggle, no note, no clue. It was as if she had vanished into thin air. Security footage was pulled from multiple cameras. One clip showed Samantha walking alone toward the bow of the ship around 11:30 p.m. She appeared calm, her movements unhurried. But the footage ended abruptly. No return, no interaction, no sign of anyone following her. The next camera, positioned farther down the deck, showed only empty corridors and flickering lights. Somewhere between those 2 points, she disappeared. The captain made an announcement, asking passengers to report any sightings or information. Some recalled seeing Samantha earlier that evening, laughing during dinner. A few remembered Daniel drinking heavily and appearing agitated. One couple claimed they heard raised voices from the Carter's cabin, but couldn't be sure. The ship's itinerary was immediately altered, and authorities in Jamaica were notified ahead of docking. By mid-morning, the cruise had become a floating investigation. Crew members coordinated with coast guards to search the surrounding waters. Helicopters scanned the ocean's surface. Divers were dispatched near the ship's last known location. But no trace of Samantha was found. No clothing, no body, no personal items. The honeymoon cruise, once filled with celebration and romance, had turned into a mystery. Passengers whispered theories. Some feared an accident. Others suspected foul play. And Daniel, now alone, remained at the center of growing suspicion. As the Ocean Pearl continued its journey through the Caribbean, the search for Samantha intensified. The ship's crew, now working alongside maritime authorities, launched a coordinated effort to locate any trace of the missing bride. The vessel slowed its pace, retracing its route near the area where Samantha was last seen. Helicopters hovered above the waves, scanning the vast expanse of water for signs of movement or debris. Divers were deployed at key points along the ship's path, plunging into the deep blue in hopes of finding something, anything, that could explain her disappearance. Inside the ship, tension grew. Passengers were asked to remain in their cabins during certain hours while investigators combed through public areas. The once festive atmosphere had turned somber. The pool decks were quiet, the bars half empty, and the laughter that had filled the air days earlier was replaced by whispers and speculation. Crew members reviewed every second of surveillance footage, hoping to catch a missed detail or shadow that might point to what happened. Daniel remained in his cabin for most of the day, reportedly distraught and unresponsive. He declined meals and refused to speak to other guests. Some passengers began to question his behavior. Others defended him, saying grief affects people in different ways. But the absence of emotion, the silence, and the timing of Samantha's disappearance raised concerns. Authorities in Jamaica prepared to board the ship when it docked the following morning. Local police, forensic experts, and Coast Guard officials were briefed on the situation. The cruise line issued a statement expressing sympathy and cooperation. But behind the scenes, investigators were already treating the case as more than a missing person. With no body, no witnesses, and no clear explanation, the search had shifted from rescue to recovery, and possibly to uncovering a crime. As investigators boarded the Ocean Pearl in Jamaica, their focus shifted from search to scrutiny. Daniel Carter was interviewed again, and this time, his version of events began to unravel. He had initially claimed that he and Samantha enjoyed a quiet dinner before she went for a walk. But multiple passengers recalled tension between them that evening. One waiter remembered Samantha leaving the table abruptly, her expression tight and upset. Another guest overheard Daniel making a phone call, sounding agitated and mentioning money. The ship's surveillance footage was reviewed again, frame by frame. Samantha was seen walking toward the upper deck alone, just as Daniel had said. But moments later, Daniel appeared on a different camera, heading in the same direction. He had told investigators he stayed in the lounge, yet the footage placed him near the same area where Samantha was last seen. No footage showed either of them returning to their cabin. Inside their room, Samantha's travel journal offered more insight. Her final entry, written the day she vanished, described feeling overwhelmed and unsure about the marriage. She mentioned arguments, pressure, and a growing sense of isolation. The tone was anxious, far from the joyful posts she had shared online. Investigators also found a receipt for a life insurance policy taken out by Daniel just weeks before the wedding, naming him as the sole beneficiary. Crew members began to speak more openly. One housekeeper recalled seeing Daniel pacing the hallway late at night, visibly shaken. Another said he had asked about security blind spots on the ship days earlier. These details, once overlooked, now painted a troubling picture. The romantic honeymoon had turned into a web of contradictions. With each new piece of evidence, suspicion deepened. The question was no longer where Samantha had gone, but what Daniel had done. The investigation took a darker turn as forensic experts examined the Ocean Pearl's maintenance logs and emergency access routes. A hidden service corridor near the upper deck, rarely used and unmonitored by cameras, became a focal point. It connected the observation deck to a lower level near the engine room. Crew members confirmed that only staff and select passengers knew of its existence. Daniel Carter, it turned out, had asked about that corridor during a casual conversation with a technician 2 days before Samantha vanished. Divers were deployed to search the waters surrounding the ship's last known location. Though the ocean offered little in the way of physical evidence, a torn piece of fabric matching Samantha's dress was recovered near a drainage outlet beneath the hull. It was not conclusive, but it added weight to the theory that her disappearance was not accidental. Meanwhile, Daniel's behavior grew increasingly erratic. He had stopped cooperating with investigators and hired a lawyer. His social media accounts were wiped clean, and his family refused to comment. A former colleague came forward anonymously, describing Daniel as manipulative and prone to sudden outbursts. Another source claimed he had financial troubles and had borrowed heavily to fund the lavish honeymoon. Authorities began reconstructing a timeline, minute by minute. Samantha's last known movements, Daniel's inconsistencies, the insurance policy, the surveillance gaps, all pointed toward premeditation. The romantic facade had crumbled, revealing a calculated plan beneath. Public interest surged. News outlets picked up the story, dubbing it the honeymoon vanishing. Online forums dissected every detail, and Samantha's family issued a tearful plea for answers. The case was no longer confined to the ship. It had become a global mystery. And as the evidence mounted, one chilling possibility loomed. Samantha hadn't disappeared. She had been erased. The media frenzy surrounding Samantha's disappearance reached a fever pitch as international outlets picked up the story. Journalists camped outside Daniel Carter's home, demanding answers. The pressure mounted, and cracks began to show. A leaked voicemail surfaced. Daniel's voice, panicked and pleading, left for an unknown recipient just hours after Samantha vanished. "It's done," he said. "I need you to make sure no one finds anything." The recording was authenticated, and investigators now had a chilling piece of evidence suggesting collusion. Authorities widened their scope, digging into Daniel's past. A pattern emerged: strained relationships, abrupt job changes, and a history of financial instability. One ex-girlfriend described his charm as performative, masking a darker, controlling side. Another former partner claimed he once threatened her when she tried to leave. These accounts, once dismissed as personal grievances, now painted a consistent portrait of manipulation and volatility. Back on the Ocean Pearl, a forensic sweep of the hidden corridor revealed faint traces of blood on a maintenance hatch. DNA testing confirmed it belonged to Samantha. The hatch led to a disposal chute used for waste management, an area rarely accessed and virtually impossible to monitor. Investigators theorized that Daniel may have used this route to conceal evidence, exploiting the ship's blind spots. Samantha's family, devastated but resolute, held a vigil on the beach where the ship had last docked. Candles flickered in the wind as her sister read aloud from Samantha's journal, her voice trembling. "I feel like I'm disappearing," the entry said. "Like I'm fading into someone else's story." The case was no longer just about a missing woman. It had become a symbol of hidden violence, of how charm can mask cruelty, and how even paradise can turn into a trap. And with each revelation, the truth clawed its way closer to the surface. The investigation reached a critical juncture when authorities obtained a warrant to search Daniel Carter's personal devices. His laptop revealed encrypted folders, one of which contained disturbing content, detailed notes outlining contingency plans, including phrases like "if she panics" and "use the corridor." There were also deleted drafts of emails never sent, one addressed to an unnamed accomplice, referencing the drop and timing the tide. Digital forensics recovered fragments of location data that contradicted Daniel's original statements, placing him near the disposal chute hours after Samantha was last seen. Meanwhile, Samantha's parents met with investigators privately, sharing new information. Samantha had confided in her mother weeks before the wedding, expressing doubts about Daniel's temper and controlling behavior. She had considered postponing the honeymoon, but feared backlash. Her mother had urged caution, but Samantha insisted she could handle it. That conversation now haunted them. A breakthrough came when a crew member anonymously submitted a photo taken the night Samantha disappeared. It showed Daniel standing alone near the upper deck railing, staring into the dark sea. His posture was tense, his hands clenched. The timestamp aligned with the moment Samantha vanished from camera view. Investigators now had visual, digital, and testimonial evidence converging on a single narrative. Public sentiment turned sharply. Online petitions demanded Daniel's arrest, and true crime podcasts dissected every detail. The Ocean Pearl was temporarily docked for further inspection, and cruise line executives faced scrutiny over security lapses. Daniel was officially named a suspect. His lawyer issued a vague statement denying wrongdoing, but the silence from Daniel himself spoke volumes. The illusion of a grieving husband had shattered. What remained was a man surrounded by lies, inconsistencies, and a growing mountain of evidence. The case was no longer